When learning to play the violin, one of the most important things you could possibly do, aside from getting a good private teacher and learning as much as you can from various resources like method books and videos, is to, of course, spend time by yourself and practice. And because of this, it's actually very important to understand how to practice. As a beginner, along with learning technique, one of the most important things that you can learn from a teacher is how to actually go about practicing. In fact, one of the most important reasons that I recommend that people learn how to play the violin is to learn how to learn. Essentially, violin playing is very difficult, and as a result, in order to excel at it, you have to practice and you have to learn discipline. But practicing isn't just discipline, it's not just doing things that are difficult, there's actually methods to learning. So in this video, we're going to talk about a portion of practice that all of us do almost every single time that we practice. Ideally, if you have the time, you would do this every single time that you sit down or stand with your instrument. And that, of course, is making sure that you have a good warm-up. Hello, fellow instrumentalists, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Jacques Gadway, and this is Gadway Violin. In today's video, we're talking about how to warm up on the violin as a beginner. As a beginner, you're likely to practice in a given day somewhere between 30 minutes to an hour. Ideally, at least 5 minutes of this time should be spent doing what I would consider to be a warm-up. I've been asked many times, what do you do to warm up, or what is your warm-up routine? And I do have a warm-up routine, but I don't think that it would apply very well to a beginner, as it has some extended and more advanced techniques within it. In addition to that, I don't think that we should necessarily be playing the exact same warm-up day to day. Anytime that we fall into too much of a routine on the instrument, we actually might find ourselves in stagnation. It's always important to have the right amount of challenge in whatever we're doing, even if that is a warm-up. Sometimes to create a challenge within a warm-up, it's sufficient enough to simply do something slightly different from day to day. You don't necessarily have to make the warm-up more difficult, but you don't want to do the same warm-up every single day. And for that reason, for this series, I'm going to be giving you a warm-up for every single day of the practice week. I'm a firm believer in the 6-day practice week, taking a day off to allow your body to recover and your mind as well. But for the rest of the days of the week, you should make sure to practice. For the first warm-up that we're going to be going over in this video, we're going to call it Beginner's Monday Warm-Up. That doesn't mean that you have to use it on a Monday, that simply means that it's the first warm-up of the set. If you'd like to follow along with the warm-up, you can find it with the link below, or you can take a screenshot of it right here on the video. For this warm-up, it's aimed at beginners who are comfortable placing all of their fingers in first position. First finger, second finger in both a high and low position, third finger in both a high and natural position, and fourth finger on a natural position. This warm-up is broken up into 3 distinct sections over the course of 2 pages. Once learned, you could use this warm-up around 1 time a week, and it should take you no longer than about 5 minutes to complete. Upon finishing the warm-up, your fingers should feel sufficiently warm to practice whatever repertoire or scales or etudes you're working on in your particular practice session. With that, let's jump right into the warm-up. As you can see, with the beginning of the warm-up, it is labeled single string. The first page of the warm-up is broken up onto every single string, starting with the A string, not because it's the first string, but because for me, the A string is the easiest, most comfortable string to play on. And as a result, it's a good place to start for our warm-up. We want to have a nice and easy way to start so that we can be comfortable and get warmed up gradually. Now I'll play through the A string warm-up for this page. One of the things to focus on when doing this warm-up is to focus on the good habits that you might already be practicing in violin playing. One of our key goals when practicing is to help reinforce good habits and avoid reinforcing bad habits. We do this by making sure that we succeed more often than we fail when we're playing passages in our practice. Warm-ups and scales and easier etudes are great options to reinforce good habits because during them we don't need to worry so much about specific notes and rather we can focus on good techniques. One of the techniques that I would especially advocate that you focus on when using this warm-up is to focus on your fingers in the left hand being very close to the string at all times. Make sure when peeling or lifting your fingers to reveal lower fingers that you're doing so with efficient movements and you're trying to lift your fingers directly above the string rather than peeling them back and away. Something that I often see players do when they're playing this kind of thing is when they lift, we'll start at the beginning again. When they lift a finger, like we would do in this spot, lifting this third finger to reveal the first, they might peel the finger back and away and curl it excessively. This is going to result in that finger not being nearby when we need it later. And that increased distance that we now need to cover in order to compensate for the distance that we've peeled it away will cause difficulties in ramping up tempo as well as difficulties in keeping consistent intonation. If you succeed in consistently applying good habits during this warm-up, you're going to feel like your fingers are starting to develop strength and independence. Focusing on these good habits during easy things like warm-ups, scales, and easier etudes allow your body to develop them more carefully, and then when you practice more difficult things like repertoire, you're able to allow your mind to wander and think about the notes and the music rather than the finite details in how you're lifting your fingers. With that, let's take a look at the next string down. This is the third line of the etude where it says D string. You may have noticed already that the pattern from the A string to the D string is identical. The only difference is that because we're in the key of G major, we have high 2s on the D string when we're playing those F sharps. Otherwise, the pattern, meaning the fingers that we're actually using, stays consistent. So learning the very first string will allow you to then play the second string, and the third and the fourth. You'll be able to play what you've learned on the A string and D string and apply that to the rest of the page. Another thing to worry about when playing these warm-ups is not just about lifting the fingers, but it's also about how you're placing the fingers. If you notice when I play these etudes, and we're going to jump ahead to the E string now, I'm placing multiple fingers at a single time. This is especially true when I'm skipping over a finger to place a higher finger. Let's take a look at measure 17 from the E string. When I place this fourth finger for that B natural, I'm placing the third finger down at the same time. And then when we need the third finger later on, all that's necessary is that we lift that fourth finger. This kind of operation is simplifying our left hand duties and allowing us to maintain good intonation, as well as speed up our playing eventually down the line. But being able to play quickly with good intonation starts here. It starts in our warm-ups, it starts in our scales, in our etudes, and then it carries over into our repertoire. On the second page of Beginner's Monday Warm-Up, we see the second official section of this warm-up, which is titled Across Strings. For these lines, we're basically going to be playing scales. There's two scales that I've chosen for this warm-up, and that's the G major scale and the A major scale. You can see that there's a key change in the midst of this section. For the G major scale, we don't stop after 2 octaves. In fact, we go all the way across all of the fingers in first position. So we start on the open string. When I'm playing my G major scale, or any scale for that matter, one of the main principles that I like to keep in mind applies to the descending scale. When I'm descending in scales, I like to make sure that when I go from a higher string to a lower string, for example, we'll start now in measure 37, descending. When we go over from the E string to the A string, I'm going to place my fourth finger on the E, But I'm also going to place my third finger. Also placing my second finger. So we're developing that habit of placing multiple fingers at a time, especially during these descents. Because during the descent, we're creating our next note every single time by simply lifting a finger rather than by lifting and placing a finger. If instead we did not place multiple fingers at a time, let's go back to 37 and see what would happen. If we just place our fourth finger here without the third finger, now when we need the third finger must go down and the fourth finger must be lifted. So we're creating multiple motions. And then likewise for the second finger, and for the first finger, and so forth. It's not the end of the world, but it is an extra effort. And what we're trying to do in our practice and in our good technique is to eliminate all of these inefficiencies. And there's few better places to worry about these efficiencies than during a warm-up. A warm-up is one of those things that you get to learn to such a point where you can almost turn your brain off in terms of what the notes are, and you can really turn your brain's attention towards these really important efficiencies and habits. The second part of across strings is simply another scale in A major with the same principles in mind. The last part of beginner's Monday warm-up is called finger mobility. And in this, we take our fingers that we know how to change, like our second finger and our third finger, and we practice efficiently changing them from their natural positions to their high positions. If we take it from that first measure, this is measure 49 of the etude. We can see that that first line is serving to help us differentiate the feeling of placing our second finger in a low position and a high position. One of the habits that we want to hone in on when we're practicing this is to worry about how our hand is reacting to these changes. Ideally, our hand shape doesn't change much at all when we're changing between C natural and C sharp. So the way that my hand looks during the C natural should look the same as during the C sharp. What I see a lot with students is that when they change from C natural to C sharp, they might actually change pretty drastically how their hand is shaped. Like so. Where there's actually a lot going on in the hand. But we want the actual finger itself to be in charge of the change. And the way that we conceptualize this change is that if we have good finger angle, which we should, good finger angle is a soft angle towards the string as opposed to a perpendicular angle. If we have that soft angle, we can create that high 2 versus low 2 by simply feeling like that finger, that second finger, is just flattening out a little bit. And that flattening out, I'll move my third finger out of the way so we can better see it. That flattening out is an independent action of the finger, and the big point of this part of the exercise of the warm-up is to literally train that. Not just to build that independence as a habit in your playing, but to set the tone for your day of practice. The next line is once again differentiating between the low 2 and the high 2. However, it just uses a different finger pattern, meaning we're starting on first finger and going to third finger, and that just changes a little bit how it feels, but the mechanism should be the same. Once again, we're trying to keep that fourth finger where it needs to be. Even though we're not playing the fourth finger in this line whatsoever, that fourth finger can't be curled in the palm of our hand. That next line, starting at measure 57, it's now where we are keeping a low 2, but we're actually changing the third finger from a natural position to a high position. And this is going to feel like quite a stretch. It's actually quite a stretch, but it's very plausible because our third finger is actually quite long, and if we use good mechanisms where we're just allowing that finger to flatten and we have a good finger angle, we should be able to reach it. Then we go on to measure 61. We have the same differentiation between the high 3 and the natural 3, except in this line, we're keeping our second finger in a high position, starting on a C sharp. And because of that, it's going to actually be a lot more physically comfortable to play. Then we move on to the next line, which is 65, and we can see that we've reverted back to a low 2, a natural 3, and then again we're alternating to that high 3 now. And once again we're trying our best to keep our hand from deforming too severely to create these changes in third finger. Even my hand is having some issues with that request, but that's because this is a very uncomfortable stretch, especially when you start to include the fourth finger. As a beginner, depending on your level, you might choose to simply skip the line that starts with measure 65 and skip the line that starts with measure 57. That's totally fine. I put those in there to challenge you if you choose to practice them. But if they're giving you discomfort, please feel free to skip them. I simply would rather give you more options than not enough. But understand that there are limitations to each of our hands, and each of our hands grow at different rates in their flexibility and finger independence. So practice within your comfort. You should not ever feel like your forearm is on fire. Finally, we end the exercise with measure 69. It's the same exact thing where we're alternating that third finger from a natural position to a high position between measures. 69 again. But it's a lot more comfortable because our second finger is on a C sharp instead of on a C natural, so there's just less of a stretch there. This entire etude will give you a great warm-up, and once learned, should not take more than 5 minutes. However, you will have to learn the warm-up first before you can apply it to your regular practice. Once again, this is the first warm-up of several that I'm going to be releasing. I'm going to make at least 6 for beginners, 1 for each practice day in the 6-day practice week. I hope this helps, and if you didn't have a warm-up before, let me know in the comments below if this is helpful. If there's a warm-up that you use and you love, please share it with me and the community in the comments below so we can take a look and all learn together. If you like the warm-up in this video, make sure to leave a like so that I know that, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss a future episode. Thank you so much for watching, and happy practicing.